Hello, I'm Elliot Sang. Welcome to Elliot Sang again. I have been coming across lately a lot of cheap recipe videos. It's something that I'm glad exists. Videos where people are breaking down essential home cooking recipes where you don't have to spend a lot of money. In particular, I was thinking about this one. Rice and beans are elite, especially in times of need. This is by Simply Mama Cooks. And nothing warms my heart more than rice and beans. I am Dominican. I love rice and beans. But this title, I think, is really smart and highlights a growing trend on this website, which is that people are looking for affordable recipes for a reason. This economy's bad. It's getting worse. And it's really important now more than ever that we learn how to sustain ourselves with whatever's available. And we learn how to cook things on a regular basis that we won't go broke off of. So please watch this video by Simply Mama Cooks. She teaches you how to cook them from dry, which is really important. I'm learning how to cook from dry. I usually cook canned beans. She teaches you how to pre-soak them. And then she teaches you how to season properly. If you can season things properly, highly, highly important. Like you can make a lot of food work. And this is the thing, a lot of folks, their whole understanding of eating is just based off of, first of all, eating out, but also like eating meat and the flavor of the meat and good cuts of meat and cheese and these kinds of recipes that are a little bit more expensive to produce, but also can put you in this state where you actually don't really know how to season. And when I tell you about this coming global food crisis and the one that's already starting to happen at your local grocery store, you will understand why it is very important to learn how to season your food, okay? This is not the only type of recipe like this. This is another example. This guy blew up on my timeline recently because he has a pasta and peas video. What Italians actually eat at home. That's got 1.5 million views in 4 months. Okay. To be clever, people are hungry for it. But in a way, this is a bad sign. I'm going to talk about how it's actually, in a way, a good sign and encouraging because this is the type of knowledge that people need to have, as I've said. But it also speaks to the fact that a lot of people are really feeling the effects of this global economic shift. They're really feeling the effects of imperial collapse. And I'm here to tell you that that's not going to get better. So today I want to read an article with you from Financial Times called the coming global food crisis by Adam Hani. I'm not going to read all of it because it's pretty long, but we'll get at some of the essential things. The subtitle is that it's not the lead, I think is what you would call this. I forgot my fucking journalism terms. The lead says hunger and even famine are foreseeable consequences of the war on Iran. Now the world must act to shield the poorest from effects that will continue long after the fighting stops. This is a key phrase, after the fighting stops, because today, the 16th of June, you might have heard that there was a ceasefire extension, and there's a lot of rhetoric around it that this is going to bring peace, this is going to end the war. First of all, those claims are tenuous. Don't buy it, it's shaky grounds. We'll get into that later. But also, even if this is it, this is the end, no more fighting, the effects from this are going to be significant down the road. Grocery shopping is not going to be the same for a long time. Those memories that you have, throw them away. Or don't throw them away, but just don't expect that to come back. Don't expect some sort of return to normal because this has knock-on effects. So it starts off talking about the green revolution and how important synthetic fertilizers, chemical pesticides, and large-scale irrigation are and building this global food economy that we have right now. India, one of the key centers of the Green Revolution, more than doubled wheat production between the mid-1960s and early 1970s. It had huge ecological and social costs. Obviously, if you know anything about chemicals, chemical usage on farms, if you know anything about synthetic fertilizers, if you know anything about factory farming and the treatment of these animals, it's horrific and it has massive ecological consequences. But there's also consequences that are now becoming very relevant for us, which is the link, as Hania says, the link it established between food production and the fossil fuel industry across every stage of farming. Higher yields depended on a vast expansion of mechanization, pumped irrigation, and above all, synthetic fertilizer use. Now, in some ways, there will be a rhetoric about essentially this being an addressing of global hunger and the necessity of keeping these cycles up to address that global hunger. Separate conversation we could have about that and about degrowth and about anthropocentrism. But today we're going to look at this article describe to us how war makes this process extremely, extremely scary and problematic. Before the mid 20th century, farmers across the global south relied on organic inputs such as manure and compost to maintain soil nutrients. The new high yielding varieties of the Green Revolution, by contrast, could only deliver their promised output through large and repeated applications of industrial fertilizers, especially nitrogen-based products such as urea and ammonium nitrate. Since many of these fertilizers are derived from natural gas, the Green Revolution meant that the world's food production became ever more closely tied to a constantly increasing supply of hydrocarbon inputs. Okay? We're reliant on these particular hydrocarbon products to have food everywhere. As you can see, and as you probably know, oil and gas prices have gone through the roof because of this US-Israeli war on Iran. But also, a significant part of the global fertilizer trade has been brought to a standstill. You have to understand that the Strait of Hormuz that is being, centered in this war, that is the center of a lot of global trade, a really important strait, not only carries essential goods through it for trade, it not only carries cars to the Middle East, it not only carries a lot of, oil output, but it also carries a lot of petroleum and other important products for this mechanized farming, chemicals for fertilizer, as Glorp says in the chat. Data from the World Bank captures these links between energy and food sharply. In March, the organization's energy price index rose 41.6%, led by a 59.4% increase in European natural gas and a 45.8% rise in Brent crude oil. In the same month, food prices rose 2.7% and fertilizer prices 26.2%. And so this also has a lot to do with the transportation of food itself. Without oil, without fuel, a lot of what keeps the global supply chain going, which is flight, which is shipment, becomes completely hampered. So not only is it just the resources that are being brought through the Strait of Hormuz that are now closed off through this war, but also just the ability to travel. And so if you live in a global south country like Malaysia or Thailand, by the way, you know quite well that the government is telling people to reduce their transportation, their usage of oil, fuel-based cars, their usage of planes, etc. Think about what impact that has on all the products that you get in your local supermarket that are from around the world. You're not buying local produce when you go to your local supermarket, right? You might get strawberries that are flown in from Florida up to New York, as one example. You also get, dates that are flown in from Dubai. You get all these different, ready-made food consumption products and frozen products. All of that comes flying in from different places. I'll get to that in a minute, Jody. Sorry, I have notifications. And Jody, I'll get to that in a minute, but essentially it's not quite as open as they want us to believe it's open. So because of this, another aspect of this that's really important to understand is, well, why is it this strait specifically, right? Because global trade often comes from different places. Often these products in our supermarkets are from China. Like we said, they're from different states within the United States. They might be from Europe. Everybody laugh with me at that one. Exports from Europe. But this is why it's important to also note the impact of the Gulf states and how much Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and the United Arab Emirates have come to occupy, as Hania says, a far more central place in the global food economy than is often recognized. They now shape the production and circulation of food directly, supplying key chemical inputs, exporting large volumes of finished fertilizers, and controlling the logistical corridors through which food and agricultural commodities move across much of the Middle East, Central and East Asia, and Africa. So this is a chart to give you that demonstration, right? Urea, 2.6.9% from Oman, 1.8% from Saudi Arabia, UAE, Bahrain. You see these percentages compared with the rest of the world. Sulfur, look at this, right? Basically half of the sulfur from the Gulf states, and a significant portion of ammonia as well. A shock in the Gulf can now cascade rapidly through the supply chains that carry food from the farm to the shelf. Any prolonged disruption in the region can therefore spread far more widely, whether this is because of the closure of key maritime corridors, places where people will ship from, higher freight and insurance costs, interruptions at ports and re-export hubs, or damage to energy and industrial infrastructure, which is a key part of how war works. It's not even just for closing off certain regions. It's where destroying certain export hubs and certain key parts of the global economy, because that's how you target somebody in war. Why is exports from Europe funny? Because it's just kind of a joke that Europe doesn't export a lot. They import a lot, especially when it comes to food, right? Of course there are some significant exports that might come from Europe, to be clear. So a lot of you guys might think of these Gulf states like Saudi Arabia as just about oil and gas, but now they're really crucial to modern agriculture. They produce fertilizers and they shape fertilizer industries across neighboring countries. Ammonia is an indispensable contribution to global agricultural systems and the starting point for all mineral nitrogen fertilizers. About 70% of the world's ammonia is used in fertilizer production, and just under 30% of global ammonia exports originate in the Middle East. Saudi Arabia is the world's second largest exporter of ammonia, and Oman is sixth. Sulfur, ammonia, these are key chemicals that are used for fertilizers. And so you're seeing what has already been a devastating period of time for farmers around the world, for poor farmers around the world, become completely unlivable in many cases because of this war, adding to what have already been global crises: lack of affordability, lack of government support, all of these different things that make, the landholder, the freeholder of farmland, or the farm worker in an increasingly difficult position. How are you going to be able to do farm work if you have to drive every day and gas costs this much? If you look at the situation in Bolivia, like, that's a huge factor in why there has been this massive resistance movement against Rodrigo Paz, the center-right president of Bolivia. This gas crisis is devastating for agricultural workers in Bolivia, and agricultural workers in Bolivia are really important, really important. So this is a really important article to understand that not only are we seeing these affordability crises right now, but also, if you know how farming works, products down the line are going to be significantly impacted. Things that are supposed to be produced now, then packaged and shipped around the world in the coming months, are going to be dwindling. Certain companies might go out of business, right? Not only is this a situation where it's clear that food across the board is going to be impacted, affordability of food is going to be impacted, and so it's going to cost you more to buy the food that you usually get. But what that means is the way that you eat has to change significantly too. We've gotten some really good chats already, like Saj All Day proposing a good cooking challenge to make a meal with only pantry items and things from your local food distro, right? It's also about what you eat, because you're not going to get access to the same foods. A lot of us in America are completely spoiled with the things we're able to access at the local supermarket, which come from colonial realities, right? Like bananas, right? Bananas don't grow indigenously here. You probably don't have many bananas growing around you. If you're in a more rural area, you probably got a lot of corn and soybean and cattle ranching, but bananas come from the global south. That's going to be difficult. A lot of fruit production is going to be halted, but also a lot of factory farming is going to be in a problematic place, because most of what we produce for agriculture is produced to feed animals that are being factory farmed to be slaughtered and then packaged and then shipped for people to eat as meat, which means a lot of you are going to have to learn how to speak tofu. Okay. It means a lot of you are going to have to learn how to speak rice and beans. And as a lot of folks have been talking about in the chat, you guys have been killing it in the chat. It's important to note how it's going to be really important for people to develop their own food growing practices. If you have the ability, and many of you do around the world, to grow at least a little something in your house, even herbs in your kitchen, or certain vegetables on a plot of land nearby. If you can do that, that is going to help you tremendously. Even if you got to bear the cost of getting like organic fertilizers and getting, the right tools to properly cultivate these plants. Studying how to garden right now, I can't express to you how important that is. If soybean is being produced this much in the United States, and most of it is going to the feeding of animals and the creation of soybean related products that aren't necessarily soy food, but then these global supply chains are going to be disrupted this much to where a lot of that farming and those production processes are going to be disrupted, you're going to have a lot of leftover soybean. and you're going to have to eat that soy. And this is where the conversation about veganism on the left or online in general, and Billie Eilish's comments about veganism are really not in the right place, right? I have in the thumbnail some comments from this Reddit post where people are talking about vegetarian making a huge difference. Reducing meat consumption is really important, even in terms of how you handle the meat that you already have, like freezing the meat that might be close to expiration instead of throwing it out, or eating parts of the animal that you don't usually eat. But you can't have a conversation about veganism purely on morality. Stop having these rage bait morality arguments, which we've established that rage bait is a tool of the CIA, and instead think about practically what you're going to have to eat, not just in terms of like having something to eat, but thinking about nutrition, right? Vanessa Tran points out soy is a complete protein, all your essential amino acids, right? All you guys talking online about soy boy this, soy boy that, soy, you better learn how to speak soy. Like, this stuff has genuine nutrition. It can be growing around you or easy to grow around you. It can be a more affordable alternative at the supermarket sometimes if certain things start getting more and more expensive, like certain cuts of meat or even eggs, right? Eggs get more expensive. And you're gonna sit here and keep trying to boost the meat production companies, big meat. You're gonna keep bolstering these meat industries and their agendas because you want to be normal, you want to be cool, you want to fit in. Brother, it is not the time to try to fit in. It is not the time to try to assimilate. You're going to assimilate to something that could have existed 10 years ago and now can't. And then you're going to be like, what am I going to eat? Some of you gym bros cracking 10 eggs for breakfast every morning. It's not happening. It's not happening. Yo, yes, Queen Eeks, thinking of philosopher K. Poyer. It's about omega-3s. Okay? It's about omega-3s. Now, as Jody points out, veganism is not for everyone. But I would argue that veganism isn't about purity, right? I have a mostly plant-based diet. Sometimes I do not eat plant-based, but most of my meals are plant-based. Meals that I make in the house with beans, vegetables, all that. Legumes, lentils. Don't even get me started on lentils. I saw somebody talk about lentils in the chat too. The iron content in lentils, the iron content in pumpkin seeds, guys. You're going to understand why animal liberation, as Estef points out, is so crucial. Once you realize that the billionaires are taking all of the meat, that the meat industries are specifically trying to push you towards unhealthy diets and also destroy your pocketbooks. They're trying to push you away from self-sustaining food systems like growing vegetables in your backyard or in your community. They're going to push you away from all of those things that are supposed to be good for you, that are based in practices that are thousands of years old, and push you towards eating the chicken sandwich that now is suddenly $9 when it used to be $5. It was never about purity. It was never about 100%. I don't eat this. I only eat vegetables because I'm a pure person. That's the elitism that bastardized veganism, that bastardized plant-based agriculture, plant-based food. That's the elitism of cultures that has co-opted and taken control of the conversation about plant-based eating. In reality, you need to eat plant-based at least twice as much as you do now. Everybody's going to have different amounts to which they might need to eat meat, that's different amounts to which they might need to eat different products. But one thing we can all say is that we all could be eating less animal products right now. Just because we want to argue with people on the internet, not just because of certain health issues, because there can be health issues related to, like, for instance, cholesterol when eating a lot of meat, but literally because we're going to go broke and die if we don't. To address something that the woke agenda has said in the chat as well, some people live in an environment where cooking isn't easy at all, so buying things that are ready made to eat can really help. It's not just propaganda and media that influences that, but your situation as well. This is what I mean. It's really important to understand what your situation is. And then it's also really important to understand how those situations are shaped by powerful forces. You have to work all day, so you have less and less time to cook. You have to eat out more. Why? Because you can't afford to live if you don't work 60 hours a week. We have had practices throughout time from people who lived very busy lives in indigenous communities, who had very serious concerns about livability, who continuously spent the time every day to cultivate food, to cook, to prepare food, to address certain nutritional groups, even when they didn't have words like nutrition that the West brought. Thank you. Because the West has this linguistic category of judging people as if they didn't understand the importance of wholesome eating patterns. Popcorn player in the chat, as a truck driver, I work 14 hours and have limited fridge space. So as a vegan, it can be tricky, right? That's why the conversation has to shift. Instead of being one about rage bait and debates online, to a conversation about pragmatically, how can we prepare for this global food crisis? Pragmatically, how can we shift our diets away from the one that's going to get us in a lot of trouble and that's getting us in a lot of trouble right now? It's not about our individual health. It's not about achievement. It's not about progress. It's not about competing. It's about community sustaining themselves. And that's what is so beautiful about recipe videos like this, right? About videos about rice and beans, about videos about, pasta and peas. These are videos about communities, after all. Communal living, communal strategies, communal food habits, right? These aren't just videos about a recipe. They're videos about ways of life. And that's why these videos are so important and why they're becoming more popular. People are drawn to them because there's bad shit going on and they need to feed themselves. And increasingly that means something decolonial, meaning it means something that's based in indigenous ways of life, that's based in traditions of impoverished people or traditions of, people in communities and communal living separate from the capital order. And that appeals to us in sentimental ways. It appeals to us in nutritional ways. It appeals to us in economic ways. It appeals to us in political ways. And I simply do not see enough conversation about this online. I simply do not see people have enough consciousness about this online. You can't have this conversation about socialism and about political economy and about war if you're not going to talk about something that literally all of us have to think about, that all of us care about and all of us share in, which is how we eat and how we produce food. So learning how to cook is such a level up, as Your Hands Are Rough says in the chat, not just because it is a way that you can avoid spending as much money as you do, not just because it is this beautiful creative craft and this beautiful tradition that you participate in, not just because you can make the thing that is exactly what you want or that's designed to your taste, not just because it sits better in your stomach than food from outside restaurants, but because it puts you in community, even when you're literally just cooking for yourself all the time. If you're getting better at cooking, you have a skill that you can give to others. If you can cook for your friends, you can help people get through capitalism's collapse. You can help people get through crisis. You can change people's lives. You can change communities' lives by cooking. And if you can understand how to prepare for calamity with a decolonized understanding of food, one that isn't about the purity of your diet, that isn't about bragging to people that you're more moral, but is about literally eating something that not only works with your morals, but works with what you like to eat and also works with your nutritional needs and also can endure against these colonial and capitalistic forces. When you can do that, you transform your life. And so if you're suffering from doomerism, cooking will do a lot for you, not just in these material ways, but literally in spiritual ways. You can feel your life get better and you can feel the optimism flow through your body the more that you learn to cook something delicious from $3 that you spend at the grocery store. The moment that you make up, there's something spiritually transformative about making a pot of beans that is just beans and it tastes really good and it feeds you and your family, it feeds you and your friends, and it meets your nutritional needs all in one. Something transforms inside you. And if you can garden, if you can incorporate some garlic shoots that your neighbor gave you, or you can incorporate the onions that you grew in your backyard, chop them up and add them to those beans, and then you're stirring those beans and you see the little, softened caramelized onions coming up, complementing the texture and the flavor, your life changes. So the title of my stream and my video is, oh, it's a bad sign that cheap recipes are getting more popular. But it's kind of tongue in cheek because in actuality, if you are ready, if you want to be ready to prepare to face this challenge, this will really, really bring you a lot of hope and joy and endurance and strength and resiliency and insight in a way that debating about somebody in an election or having arguments online simply won't. Last thing I'll say is, whether or not this war was going to happen, food prices have been a problem. In May, the world food prices slipped a little bit, but are still near a 3-year high. You have, for instance, massive increases in price for world cereal production. And that's without the war, or with different changes in the war, which supposedly is ending, but in actuality is an extension of a ceasefire. This is from the TLDR News global coverage, by 60 days with small concessions. The idea is that Iran will open the Strait of Hormuz again, but they're only opening it in a limited capacity. Things are going to take a lot of time. And if the ceasefire ends without them agreeing to an actual deal, then they're going to start bombing again, and the strait is going to get closed again. So this could be years, right, of damage done by this already. And they're probably going to go back to war again. So I cannot stress the urgency enough. Every time you see one of these videos on your timeline about rice and beans or pasta and peas, you got to hit that like button because you're going to need it. You're going to need it.